this is Wendy Boucher, the founder of Bliss Finance and the author of The Cash Formula. Welcome. Welcome to the webinar on credit. I'm a deep believer that cash is king, but credit is queen. Lots of people going through life without understanding how credit can benefit them or how credit has killed them. As a result, they don't know how to leverage or understand how to play the game. So what I want to do today is to give you 3 topics for you to think about. First, I want to go over the different scoring systems because people don't realize why there are different systems, different scores, and I want to kind of explain that to you. Second, I want to explain to you how to go about fixing issues on your own. I'm a deep believer that you should be able to do everything on your own because I want you to be your own financial boss. Last, I want to talk about how to improve your credit scores. There's some very specific tactics that I want to share with you so you can actually take control of your credit in your own hands. So let's go and get started. What are the differences of credit scores? Now, people don't understand what you get on the internet or what you get from the financial institution is what we call educational credit score. So what's the difference between educational versus the lender's use of credit scores? Well, first, what the lender uses is what they call a special service that they contract with each of the credit bureau. So let me kind of break that into further. Each financial institution has certain risk factor they want built in their own model, in their own background, underwriting guidelines. So what happened is, whenever they have an opportunity, they're going to evaluate a loan. They're going to be based on a risk model that they're building for the financial institution. So when they turn around and ask for the service or sign up for the service from the credit bureau, they have very specific parameters that they build in. So that means every single time you go to a different financial institution, you might not have the same credit score with the same company. So I just want to make that distinction. So what does that mean is if you actually get a credit score from Credit Karma, it's what we consider as an educational credit score. I had a client that came to my office, actually pulled out Credit Karma right at the back with a phone, and I compared the Equifax on my computer system that I pulled strictly from the lender's desk. Guess what? The scores were off. And now the customer was so confused as far as she did not understand why the discrepancies. And that's what I let her know. Credit Karma is a great tool. It is a baseline because you need to know what is on your credit report. So understand there are different credit systems out there, and every single credit bureau is going to be different. So the reason I said every credit bureau is going to be different is because you might have a lender A that only uses Experian. A lender B will use Equifax. So what happened is if you have a perfect credit trade lines with Experian, but you don't have anything gets reported to Equifax, and actually you are going to get a loan from lender B who uses Equifax only. So what does that do to your credit? You don't have everything to report to show the lender what you have done. And that's the reason why I want you to understand. Every lender, number one, uses a different credit bureau. Number two, every credit bureau has a different credit model that's been built in specifically designed for the financial institution. I came from a background where this particular credit union actually has contracted with Equifax. And what happened was that this Equifax was used for dealership, specifically for car loans. The car loans model has certain risk factors built in versus the Equifax that is actually designed for the branch. So same company, same credit bureau, but yet different scores within the same company. So that is something that I really want for you to keep in mind in terms of why you're going to see some discrepancies time to time and so forth. But also understanding that every single lender out there is not going to have the same credit score or use the same credit score. For example, some business department might be using only Experian, whereas the small business loan will use Equifax, or vice versa. So credit card department is going to have a certain credit bureau that they use, and then regular underwriting loans going to have a different credit scores, different credit bureau. So it's kind of confusing, but I just want to let you know that baseline, you must know what's on every single credit report. So how do we go about finding that? And that takes me to the second step of how to fix your credit. Federal Trade Commissions recommends, and I'm going to go ahead and share the screen so you'll be able to see, that you are actually able to get a credit score, or excuse me, credit report every 12 months. And one of the recommendations is use a site called annualcreditreport.com. Annualcreditreport.com is a service where it allows you to have 3 credit bureaus at your fingertips every 12 months. I myself has been a fraud victim for several times now. My identity got stolen. Someone ordered a phone and shipped to the United States. So every single time something happened to me, my first resource is always annualcreditreport.com. And what I did was I would pull each of the credit bureau and find out exactly anything that gets reported that should be on there. And I have done several disputes on my own as a result of all the corrections that I have found. So right here on the annualcreditreport.com, all you have to do is request your free credit report. Now, you don't need to get your credit score. Why? Because there's no reason for you to get the credit score. There's no reason for you to pay. I'm always about free stuff. So you don't need to get a credit score right now. All your focus right now is to check and see if, in fact, everything else here is actually true and correct. So what you're going to do is you're going to pull every single one of them for free every 12 months. You're going to analyze every single one of the credit bureau to see if there's any discrepancies. If you find any discrepancies, your job is to go and dispute them online and provide supporting documents. And that's exactly what I have done. When I pulled one of the credit report and I saw that I was actually delinquent for one of the trade line, which I was very surprised because I'm the kind of person that's always pay everything on time, even before the deadline. So what had happened was that this particular creditor had sent me a bill that I never got. So the creditor stated that I must have moved. And I told the creditor, no, I've lived there for 20 plus years. There must be a mistake. I went ahead and made the payment right away, but I also disputed. And what I did was I wrote a letter specifically documenting why I felt that was not justified and I had the right reason for that part. And as a result, they went ahead and removed that records from my bad credit sections on that particular credit line. So the moral of the story is you have to make sure that you take control of any issue that you feel that's legitimate. And again, I emphasize the word legitimate because a lot of people are trying to dispute something that is actually true and correct. You can't do that. They want to make sure that whatever you provide is actually true and correct and with the supporting documents. And they have to make sure that they give you records and update your records within 30 days. In my case, I did exactly that. I went ahead and provided a supporting document. I wrote a letter exactly specifying why that I never got a letter. There must be something with the post office because I was never late. My record is perfect as far as payment is concerned, and they know that. Number 2, I wrote every single one of the credit bureau a letter stating exactly what I just stated to the creditor, and I submit both documentation online within 30 days. They removed that derogatory remark, and now my credit was back to where it was, which was in a real high standing. So I share the story with you is to let you know that you can fix the credit on your own. You don't need to have someone fix that for you or pay a fee for that. Another thing that I want to share with you is to fix the credit is certain thing that you got to be aware. What I mean by that is you're more than welcome to fix anything with a name mixed up. If something like a junior, senior, or anything that doesn't belong to you, definitely dispute that. Anything that you have a documentation that you made the payment, but it didn't reflect, there was a dispute between that, make sure that you keep the right documentation and bring that to their attention. Because stating without facts, without any documentation is not going to get you anywhere. Another thing that I want for you to consider is if you have a trade line that's kind of aged, for example, it's like 5 years or 6 years that you were delinquent, it is best just leave it. The reason being is if you pay it off, it's going to get reflected as if you reopened it up. So my situation has been years ago when I was very young. Let me kind of give you an example of what happened when I was young. I actually had an apartment. I was living in an apartment, but I actually have a little rental property that I bought. So I rented a little rental property out, but I was losing money. Because I was losing money, so what I did was I went ahead and moved into my own property. but I forgot I had a lease. I signed a lease. So I just walked out of my lease, didn't realize any implications or the consequence of that. Of course, I was young, did not know any better, didn't know that how that's impacting my credit. And this is what happened, because I owed them the rent and all the costs relating that I didn't pay. So they reported my credit. So the next 7 years, my credit was tarnished. So moral lessons that I really want to share with you. You need to own what your mistake. If it's honest, blatant mistake, own it up, pay it. Okay, because you owe the creditor. Number one, don't walk away like what I did. Big mistake. Second of all, understand anything that's out there is going to come back and haunt you for the next 7 years if it stays on there. Number three, if it's something like a medical bill that you just keep on disputing, you know that it's not going anywhere, but it's almost like the 6th year now, let it go. Just let it go, because you know what? I do understand the principle behind things. Just let it go. Let's pass into the 7th year, it's going to get dropped off. So what are you going to do in between is going to be the challenge, because if you're going to get credit in between, that's where you're going to get a higher interest rate, because you've got that little blemish on top of your credit report. So just something to be mindful of when you play the game of a credit. Now, lots of people want to improve their credit. They really don't know how to do that. So one of the tips that I want to share with you is how to go about doing that in the most effective way. So let's give an example here. There's A and B. Let's assume that A has a credit limit of $10,000, and so as B. So both have the same line of credit, $10,000, but A actually used $2,000. Okay, so how much does the A has? A actually has $8,000 available. Now B used $5,000. So what does that mean? That means that B has $5,000 available. Now, with everything else equal, what do you think is going to be the one that has a higher credit score? Yeah, the one that actually has a higher available. So that is the game of how you play credit, is understanding the lower the utilization rate, the higher the credit score is going to be. So one of the key things to improve your credit score is, number one, pay on time. If you are late, it's going to be late. Don't be late. But if it's late 5 years ago, you can't do anything about that. There's chances the impact is going to be much more critical when it's recent. So what I mean by that is, if you were late 2 months ago versus that you were late 3 years ago, this 2 months is going to be much more impactful on your credit score. So just be mindful of, understand that payment history is going to be a big factor, because it actually plays up to 35% on your credit score. That's going to impact your score. So that's number one. Second thing, you got to make sure that you have the lowest utilization possible. When I say the lowest utilization rate, meaning what we just talked about here, lowest utilization rate is like here. If you have low utilization rate, meaning you only use 2,000 versus using 5,000, so the credit score is going to be much higher when you have more available. So that is a game that you have to understand when you apply for credit. Do not apply credit when you're almost maxed out. Do not apply for any credit when you just paid it off, certain thing, because it's not going to reflect on the credit report. It's going to show up a couple days, weeks later, depending on the system. So just rule number one, know when you apply. Two, understand that the higher the available, the higher the credit. So now, coupled with pay on time, that makes up 35% for pay on time, 30% utilization rate. So that's 65% of your credit score that you can actually control using the strategy right there. So what if this is what's happened, but you actually went to the creditor and said, you know what? I like to have an increase of line of credit. So this right here, B decided to have an increase of $10,000. So now this person actually has $20,000, and this person actually has $15,000 available. So now who has a higher credit score? Yeah, B is the person that's going to have, because you know what? It's actually have a higher available credit. So that is a game that you will play based on how to improve your credit score. Yeah, you're like, I can't get my loan, or my lender does not improve my credit score. So what can I do? Well, one of the quickest way is to find someone that you know that trusts you, and the key word is trust you. That person also have a very high credit score or credit limit. Ask that person to add you as an authorized signer. Yeah. So for example, if that person actually has $50,000 line of credit on the credit card, and the maximum you've got is $5,000, and you really couldn't get that $5,000 increase by the lender, if you're able to get that $50,000 limit added on to your credit bureau, what does that do to your credit? Yeah, it's going to go up. And that's the reason why you see a lot of children, their parent added their name to as an authorized signer. They've got like 700 credit score, and yet they don't have any credit file. The credit file is very thin, and that's a game that they have played. But for you to do it properly, just want to let you know that's one of the strategies that you can increase your credit score is by, number one, ask to increase your credit. 2, get to be added as an authorized signer. 3, make sure you always pay on time. 35% of that makes up for that. And always make sure that you have the lowest utilization rate as possible. So those are the 2 things that you really need to understand how the credit score played on your part. Now, very often that people will just get a credit score, try to understand where they are. Don't. You don't need a credit score, because every single time you pull it, it's going to hurt you. And that's what I call a hard pull. So let me kind of explain to you what hard pull is. There are 2 differences. There's a soft pull and there's a hard pull. Soft pull is something like when you go to a bank, when you open an account, the banker said, oh, guess what, Mr. Jones? You're lucky. You got pre-approved for $5,000 credit, or you got approved for $1,000 of a personal line of credit, or $4,900 of overdraft protection. If you actually get pre-approved based on a soft pull, meaning they don't hit your credit, take it. And the reason you want to take that is because, first of all, now you just got to increase credit line without hard pull your credit. Because whenever you get an offer in the mail, have you seen all those offers? Yes, you get offers all the time. And they say, oh, you've been pre-approved for $5,000, all of that. But if you apply, it's going to be a hard hit. So whenever there's a hard hit, that's going to hurt your credit score. So every time you actually apply for a loan, hard hit is always going to take place on your credit report. So be very, very careful with some banks or credit unions out there that actually want to pull your credit report every single time that you open an account. The reason being is if you just happen to be applying for a mortgage, in the middle of that, you actually open an account with this financial institution, and they told you there's going to be a hard pull, that's going to affect your credit. You don't want to do that, especially in the middle of the mortgage application. So always understand, ask the lender, is it going to be a soft pull or is it going to be a hard pull? So that is one thing that you have to make sure that you know the distinction between the 2. Another thing that you have to know the distinction between check systems and credit scores. Lots of confusion out there. People say, what is that check system going to affect my credit? If I owe a bank money because due to the overdraft protections or overdraft fees, is that going to come back in my credit report? Well, the answer is no. Whenever you owe money to a bank based on the account activities are not going to get reported to the credit bureaus. What gets to be reported to the credit bureaus are the following. Number 1, your employment, who you work for. 2, date of birth, your age, and also the names and the addresses. And last but not least, the trade line. Whatever the trade line that you have applied, credit card, student loans, mortgage, personal loan, car note, or any line of credit that's out there. Now, if you actually borrow money from your friends and your friend does not report that, by all means, if nothing gets reported until this particular individual, this particular organization actually has contracted service with 3 of the credit bureaus. Now, not every single creditor reports to every single bureau. And that's the reason why when you have gotten an educational credit score from, let's say, Bank A, for example, and you've got a perfect credit score with Bank A with Experian, but yet you've got everything that is horrible under Equifax, guess what? Bank A will not know anything about Equifax because they don't pull Equifax. So that's to your advantage. So you got to know, really understand what's reported, where it's going to be reported, and what the lender's going to use. So those are the secrets that you really want to make sure that you know about credit. So what I want to do is I want to answer some questions that I got through the chat. So one of the things that I've got is, oh, this is a bad one. Divorce. Yes. What do I need to do? I'm in the process of getting divorced, or actually I have a divorce. Now my ex is really hurting my credit. Yeah, we've seen this a lot on a regular basis. So one of the things that I really want to caution you, if you know that you are heading to that route, one thing that you want to do is, first of all, make sure you remove that person from your credit as an authorized signer. If you actually have your husband or wife, whoever is actually going to be, is on the account as an authorized signer, remove that. Because there's a huge chance that person is going to rack up the credit as a result of it and not pay. And I've seen that on a regular basis. So number one, remove the person as an authorized signer. Number two, whatever you can, freeze the credit report. And the reason you want to freeze the credit report is you want to make sure that no one can apply new credit under your social. And I have seen this happen a lot. The exes decide to use somebody else's social security number, the exes, because this person knows everything about the person. And guess what? Send a new addresses, new credit card, you name it, it's a total mess. Third thing, if you actually share a house, it is recommended that if you can have whoever keeps the house, go ahead, get that house refinanced under that individual name. Because what happened is, regardless of what it says on the divorce decrees that Jane Doe pays it, not John Doe, whatever, the lender's eyes, you are still one of the borrower. If you are the borrower, I don't care what happened to you, divorce or whatever, you're still obligated. Any negative remark is going to get reported on your credit. And that's what has happened to a lot of husbands. The wife gets a house, and the wife could pay. And now the husband is screwed because the husband still has that mortgage under his name, even though he doesn't own the house, even though he doesn't, it's part of the divorce decrees, you name it, but the loan is still tied up to his name. So I really want to caution you to really deal with anything that has to do with divorce. Another question that I've got here is about student loan. Now, this is another biggie one. If you have a student loan out there, do not, let me repeat, do not pay. Under any circumstance, please work with your servicing department or servicing company to find a way. If you really can't pay due to the job situation, ask to see if you actually can have a deferred or have a forbearance. There are two different types, either to be forbearance or also get a deferred. And again, every servicing company will be able to tell you if in fact they can do the option. The last thing that you want to do also is to consider consolidations. Whatever you do, do not ignore student loans. If you're late in payment, try to make it up because it's going to come back and haunt you one way or the other. So that is one of the biggest things that I really want everybody to take away is, what is your responsibility? Assume it. You can't get away with it. And again, be responsible. Understand when and how to play the game. One of the key things to do is make sure that you pay everything on time. If you pay everything on time, there's no reason that you're going to fall behind. And if you budget properly, you always have enough funds to pay, at least pay the minimum. That's all I've focused on. Pay the minimum. Get it out of the way every single month. Also, make sure that you have the lowest utilization possible. Don't max it out, because the more you max it out, the lower the credit score is going to be. Well, I hope this session served you. And again, if you have any more questions, go ahead, give us a shout, give us some questions. We'll be more than happy to answer to that in the chat room. Until I see you next time, stay unique, be alive, and make an impact.